Because of course all these greedy beggars are just basically exploiting the hard times that have befallen everybody else. Never missing an opportunity to make a quick buck on the back of other people's misfortunes. Hey up! And welcome back to the channel. Beautiful day today to be out on my Honda ST1300 Pan-European. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you're not new to the channel but you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Doesn't cost you a penny, and if I bore you to death, you can unsubscribe just as easily by the click of a mouse or the tap of a finger. So please, if you would, it feeds the algorithms and that helps grow the channel. But if you're new to the channel, basically I am the Bingley Wheeler. You'll be astonished to learn that I live in Bingley in God's own county of Yorkshire. And basically this channel has evolved into a format which comprises basically of 3 different areas related to motorcycling principally. First off, I regularly do bike reviews. Try to do one a week and give you my thoughts on some of the bikes that are new to the market this 2023 season. I also cover riding routes and areas of natural beauty in and around the Yorkshire Dales. And thirdly, and this will be today's, I engage in a little bit of, what shall we call it, social commentary, current affairs. And I'm just going to have a little chat today, if you'll indulge me, about the lack of wisdom which is clearly associated with ultra low emission zones, ULEZ zones and CAZ zones, clean air zones, and some things that they're trying up in Scotland now, in I think it's Edinburgh, Glasgow and is it Dundee? I think possibly Dundee. Maybe wrong there, but I'm fairly sure it's Edinburgh and Glasgow as well, where these restrictions have come into place. We'll have a little chat about that and the dubious logic behind it, and indeed the unfairness behind it. My first thought is on the increasing proliferation of these marvellous ideas, is that what we are actually dealing with is a human condition which emerges in some people once they get a bit of power. Now, those of you that are regular viewers of this channel will know that I was a police officer for 30 years, and during that time, and indeed since then, I've worked extensively with local authorities, or councils, as they're known here in the United Kingdom. So I know a thing or two about how some people conduct themselves once they get a bit of power. So let me start with a little tale from 3 or 4 years ago. So 3 or 4 years ago I was working as a funeral director. I'd retired several years prior to that from the police. I was working as a funeral director, and it was a bank holiday Monday. Now, in the Bingley Shipley area, there is a bus lane which goes all the way into Bradford, some 7-8 miles down the road. And if you know the area, you'll be familiar with that bus lane, and it operates from Monday to Friday between 7:30 and 9:30. So the key here is why it only operates Monday to Friday, and the reason for that is very clear, and that is that traffic levels on Saturdays and Sundays are considerably less than they are during the week. And I think that's a truism that would apply across the country. So obviously when the legislation was enacted and that bus lane was put down, there had clearly been a rationale along those lines, rooted in the principle that proportionality should apply, and that therefore when the traffic in rush hour traffic, that people should be able to use the whole of that road. It is a single carriageway road. So this particular bank holiday Monday at 8:30, I'd had to go into work to the funeral directors, which is on the main road, right on that main road, right on the bus lane. And on this particular morning I'd had to go in. I obviously won't say why I had to go in, but it was important work. And I left at 8:30, and the road was absolutely deserted. It was literally without a car in sight, which wouldn't be surprising on that road at that time in the morning on a bank holiday Monday. And I, for whatever reason, drove out of the works premises and straight into this bus lane. Didn't think anything about it. Strictly speaking, and by the letter of the law, yes, strictly speaking, a contravention of the bus lane, because it was a Monday. But anyway, so of course, a couple of weeks later, lo and behold, I get the bus lane contravention notice, and pay this fine. If you don't pay it in a week, it'll be double. So I thought, naively, I'll try and plead my case here. So I wrote in, or rather I emailed in, and explained the situation, and then put forward what seemed to me, and still seems to me, a perfectly reasonable rationale, which was, look, you've got this bus lane, it only operates between 7:30 and 9:30 Monday to Friday, and I know the rationale for it not operating at the weekend is because traffic levels do not warrant it. And I pointed out, and this is clear on the photograph of me in my car after I'd tripped the camera, that the road was deserted, and I pointed out this fact that this particular morning, Bank Holiday Monday, it was quieter than any Saturday or any Sunday, which had previously been deemed quiet enough to justify not operating the bus lane. So on this occasion, and given that I was doing this particular job and I had a particularly important reason to be there, etc, etc, and you know, I'm very sorry, it was an oversight, but surely the rationale is that you know, your bus lane really should either not be in operation on a bank holiday Monday at that time in the morning, or should not be enforced. Well, you can guess the reply. it was verging on the nonsensical. It basically said, well, notwithstanding that it's a bank holiday, sometimes bank holidays are very busy. Let me tell you, on that stretch of road, on a bank holiday Monday, any bank holiday Monday, at 8:30 in the morning, it is always far quieter than ever it is on a regular Saturday or Sunday. Fact. So therefore, by logical extension of that rationale, there should have been a thought process along the lines of that principle applying on this occasion on an ad hoc basis, and surely an occasion for the council to exercise a little bit of goodwill and understanding and to waive the penalty on this occasion. But no, they were having none of it. So I ended up having to pay it. So what does this point illustrate? Well, when you submit a written appeal about a penalty notice that you think has been unfairly imposed upon you, whether it's parking or bus lane contravention or whatever it is, you'd think, wouldn't you, that when you set out the grounds of your appeal and submit those grounds to the relevant authority, that somebody in a relatively senior position with a lot of experience and requisite qualifications is going to make the decision. But they don't. They're made at quite a junior level, and let me tell you, there's little, if any, diplomacy or pragmatism or understanding to be had. And it all derives, I'm absolutely convinced, from a sense of evolved arrogance which has built up over a period of time of working in an organisation which is replete with the imposition of rules and regulations and sanctions and the rest of it. In other words, there's just no reasoning with some of these people. There's no reasoning, there's no argument, there's no debate to be had, there's no fairness, there's no equanimity, and basically if you try and take some of these people to task, you just get shut down. I'm sure you may have experienced this yourself, and the same can be said of the police on a lot of occasions. So what's this got to do with clean air zones and ultra low emission zones? Well, it's the same principle at play. There is no logic to, for example, the Bradford clean air zone. So we've got this here Bradford clean air zone. It only applies to commercial vehicles at the moment, but they have to be at a certain level of Euro compliance, which rules out older vehicles. So if you're a struggling business and you're operating older commercial vehicles because that's all you can afford to do basically, suddenly you're getting hammered because you'll trip the cameras in the clean air zone and you get a fine. And I am sure that they will seek to extend this to private use vehicles in the future, and the same principle will apply. If you can't afford either an electric vehicle or a new Euro compliant vehicle, then you get whacked. Simple as that. No argument, no debate, no discussion about fairness, no nothing. And it's always the case, isn't it, when these policies are enacted, that it's the least well off that end up getting the sharp end of the stick every time. Now I can virtually guarantee, and I haven't researched this, so it's off the top of my head, but I'll virtually guarantee that the official line from the council would be something like, we've done air pollution and particulate monitoring, and there's sound science behind it, and the sound science to say that if you enforce clean air zones and restrict their use to certain newer vehicles, the air quality improves. The only problem with that science is it flies in the face of logic, because the Bradford Clean Air Zone, it doesn't have its own microclimate. So all it takes is for the wind to blow and whatever's in the atmosphere is completely redistributed in any case. That's the first thing. So point one, the atmosphere, the local climate is not static in that small area. Point two, these regulations, whether intended or otherwise, have a direct and disproportionate impact upon the least well-off. And we look at the least well-off people in society, and they're often the critical workers in society that just keep the whole show on the road. So you might be talking about supermarket workers, food industry workers in general, hospital workers, a lot of them, utility workers, all of these people, you know, probably on what, 10, 11, 12, 13 pound an hour, whatever, you know, no great shakes. You're certainly not in a position to afford the latest, newest Euro compliant vehicle. They're the ones getting clobbered by this policy. So much for the government's levelling up. These policies are absolutely polarising the already polarised distribution of wealth. Because of course rich folk, they buy the latest, newest, greenest car and carry on as normal. But not all these other poor buggers getting clobbered again. Thirdly, does anybody think that if you introduce a zone of restriction which excludes the use of certain vehicles, that the people using those vehicles on their journey, does anybody think that they're not going to just find another route to get from A to B? And by definition, because of where certainly the Bradford Clean Air Zone is located, by definition that journey will become more circuitous, and in becoming more circuitous will become longer, and therefore will result in more emissions from vehicles, because they're on the road for a longer period of time, over a longer distance, because they're having to drive around the clean air zone. So it just makes an absolute mockery of it from start to finish, in my view. Ill thought out, and what it actually is it's a combination of the arrogance that comes with officialdom and the laziness which comes with ticking boxes for central government and its green agenda, so called. So I've no doubt somewhere along the line that there'll be a policy from central government mandating local authorities, local councils to have some form of green strategy, and instead of thinking it through intellectually and conducting the right amount of consultation and really delving into the depths of the issue, no, we'll just have a clean air zone, stick up some cameras and fine anybody that breaches it. It's a lazy-brained approach. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm not a climate denier, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although what were once regarded, or would now be regarded as conspiracy theories, a lot of them have been proved to be correct. I think we can all guess what a lot of those are. But no, I mean, you can't keep a straight face and just deny that there are year on year changes in the climate. You've only got to look at the extreme weather events across the globe of floods and storms, wildfires, etc. But there's a couple of big questions really. One is it wholly or mainly man-made? Or is it just part of the Earth's well-known historical warming and cooling pattern? Because certainly in history it's been warmer than it is now, and a lot colder than it is now. And the other thing is, even if we do accept that it is wholly or mainly man-made, is going around throwing up restricted zones for travel that adversely impact upon the least well-off the right, fair and proportionate way of going about it? I don't think it is. But the reason common sense is not prevailing, it comes back to my original point, that this actually derives from the human condition, that some people, when you put them in a position of power, become blinkered, authoritarian, they get absolutely pissed on the power that they've been given, and they just can't help themselves. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but there are a sufficient number with a sufficiently disproportionately loud voice woven into the fabric of our society, mainly in national and local government. Right, hey up. Where was I? Sorry, batteries went flat again on camera, so just had a pot of steam at Squires. Where were I? Yeah, I was trying in my own clumsy way to try and explain A, why some of these mad decisions are made around restricted vehicle use, and B, why there's no debate to be had about it whatsoever, no arguments to be had about it, and it's about the individuals concerned. And they get to a point in their respective careers where, frankly, they're so used to dishing out grief to the rest of us and making us have it, basically, that they become absolutely blinded and deafened to reason and proportionality and objectivity and real world thinking. And the longer they spend in these roles, the worse they get. And I think back over 30 years of coppering and working with councils, and don't get me wrong, vast majority of people, right-minded, committed, professional people. But so often you get cropping up in significant positions of power people whose sole mission in life is to dish it out to others. And that's the problem that we've got, because our governments, both national and local, and the civil servants that serve them, are all absolutely steeped and stewed in this way of working. So that sort of brings us to the obvious question: is what on earth are we going to do about it? Now, there comes a point, I think, where you reach a critical mass, and we're getting close to that critical mass where people are being pushed and pushed to, frankly, the most ridiculous levels now, that they will be forced into uncharacteristically robust action, or perhaps more appropriately inaction. And probably one of the strongest forms of protest against the establishment is inaction rather than action. So I suspect what might happen is a lot of these critical workers that flog the guts out day in and day out to keep the country going on minimum wage or just a bit above, and they find that they're getting clobbered through not only through general inflation, but specifically the kind of inflation that affects them more than anybody else, because it's inflation on essentials like food inflation. What is it, 17-18%? And that disproportionately affects people on low income, because of course obviously a much bigger proportion of their income has to go on things like food and rent, stroke, if they're lucky, mortgage payments, and they've all gone through the roof, together with fuel and energy costs. And you can guarantee that having gone up, even though the wholesale costs have come right back down, that the retail costs won't have done. Because of course all these greedy beggars are just basically exploiting the hard times that have befallen everybody else. Never missing an opportunity to make a quick buck on the back of other people's misfortunes. So we all know that happens. We've seen it with fuel costs, haven't we, where cost of a barrel of crude goes through roof, so forecourt prices go through roof, and then cost of a barrel of crude drops dramatically, as it has done, and yet the retail price at the pumps comes down by a fraction of that amount. And we're all used to that rip-off, but it applies right through the sector. So I think basically what will happen is these people that are the backbone of the country, the working people are the backbone of the country, they're still going to have to get to work. So one or two things happens basically, don't it? They find a way around these zones, and in so doing obviously end up spending a lot more time on the road, pumping out a lot more fumes from the cars and bikes. But they've got to do it. If you've got to get to work and there isn't reliable public transport, and you work say 5-10 miles away from where you live, you've got to find another way to work, haven't you? So you just drive around the ULEZ or the CAZ zone. That's what you do. So it achieves diddly squat. It also means you're poorer still, because you're paying for more fuel, but it just makes a mockery of the claimed motivation for having these restrictions in the first place. The second thing I could potentially see happening, this is where it comes to protest through inaction, is people who just drive through the ULEZ zones anyway, and the CAZ zones. Right, fair enough. £60 a day, whatever it is, fine. Get the fine through the post and just ignore it. I think that's what will happen. There's a very big chance of that, of there being a mass movement which may or may not be coordinated by somebody at some point, and a point will be reached where the straw has well and truly broken the camel's back, and it'll just be people arbitrarily driving through these restricted zones to get to work or to get to whatever they have to do, receiving the fine through the post and just not paying it, and then take it from there. And I wouldn't mind seeing some of these arguments legally tested, because depending upon which bit of legislation you might choose to invoke, I can see a very powerful argument whereby somebody goes before a court and says, look, I'm a critical worker, I work in healthcare, I work in social care, I work in the food industry, I work for the utilities, you know, I'm paid £11-12 an hour, my rent's gone through roof, my energy bills gone through roof, food prices have gone through roof, I've got to work, I've got to get to work, but now they've brought in these bloody CAZ zones and I can't get to work. and the only way I can get to work is to stick another hour on my journey by driving round it, and I can't afford to do that anyway. So over to you, Mr. Judge, Magistrate, Adjudicator, or whatever. You decide on the balance of natural justice and the historical precedents of common law whether or not it is right, fair and proper to hinder me, a member of the critical working infrastructure of this country, to get to work because A, you put these completely unreasonable restrictions which disproportionately negatively impact upon the lower paid, and B, you don't provide an effective or reliable network of public transport. I'd love to see that tested in court, because I think a good advocate could really make a meal out of that. And out of that hopefully would come some decided cases which would set precedent, and the whole thing would then hopefully be decreed as unlawful, and all these fines would be set aside. And I think that's a distinct possibility going forward. So just a few thoughts for you today. Like I say, I'm not anti-green, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm not a climate denier. I'm just critically thinking about whether some of these knee-jerk, ill-conceived, lazy-brained options are the right way to go about it. So, let's sign off there. If you've watched this far, thank you for doing so, and until the next time, ride safe, be kind, and I'll catch you on the next one. Toodle pip.